Well, good morning. I appreciate that, Reed. I don't know how many of you really know that much about what Reed does. There are days that I'm not sure that Reed does. But I challenge you to find anything significant that's gone on in this community in the last 4 or 5 years that his group hasn't had some hand in. It's very hard work. Certainly not always recognized for the value that it provides. And I can tell you we are extremely fortunate in this region to have someone of Reed's caliber and his vision and his tenacity in terms of sometimes taking us to places that we know are good but not always taking us the way we want to go. That doesn't mean that it didn't work, it just means that we haven't thought about it the way he has, and we certainly appreciate his work and what he does for the region. I also want to tell you that I have lived this regionalism conversation. I remember probably 15 years ago, we were fortunate enough to have a United States congressman whose name was Marion Barry. He was a very practical, pragmatic, common sense sort of a politician that really did a great job for Eastern Arkansas during his tenure. I remember he came by my office one day and he sat down and he said, "Son, I don't know where you get all this stuff, but you have some really good ideas. And what you're doing is creating a brand new way of thinking about education. But every time I find a way to get you some money, I make 4 or 5 other communities, 4 or 5 other community colleges in the region mad. I can't keep sending all this money to you." He said, "If you want to really help me help you, then you figure out a way to float everybody's boat when you're making these decisions, when you're creating these models." At the time, there were 4 community colleges in Eastern Arkansas, roughly 30 miles apart, who really saw themselves as distinct competitors. They saw themselves as folks that had to always be monitoring what the other folks were doing and trying to respond as opposed to thinking about what was best for their community or their region. Those folks liked each other. They could stand to be in the same room for a little while. You couldn't get them in the same car together for any length of time. But they were, I guess, at a place that they were open to the conversation. I like to tell people that what we were doing in Eastern Arkansas was not about innovation, not about inspiration. It was not about any sort of divine intervention initially. It was about one simple thing: desperation. We knew we couldn't continue the way that we had been operating because we weren't getting the results that we needed. And we certainly knew that if we were going to have a different future, we had to think about how we educate folks differently. And we had to do that together, collectively. We didn't have the luxury of having it work in separate silos because simply we had already learned that that didn't work. So we did form a consortium. I remember distinctly the first grant that we requested was a $20,000 grant split between 5 institutions, and the grant was absolutely worth maybe 1/10 of the trouble that it took to get it and the trouble it took to implement it. But we wanted to at least set the stage for the fact that if we sort of all got on the same page, we could do some cool stuff. It took weeks for me to get every one of those presidents to sign off on that agreement. They were checking every semicolon, every comma. They were worried about every little hyphen, making certain that their institution was appropriately represented and that we weren't going to be doing something that didn't provide them the same benefit as everyone else. We got the grant, and we produced the desired outcomes, and then we applied for I think the next one was a $2 million grant. I noticed it didn't take quite as long to get the $2 million grant approved because we'd sort of practiced at the smaller level. After the $2 million grant, we went after an $8 million grant. I mailed the stuff electronically to the presidents, got a response in about 5 minutes. I know they didn't read it, they didn't have time. they'd already signed off on it, because we had built a level of trust and a level of cooperation and a level of common goals in terms of what we wanted to create in the region. At the end of that process, we had the divine intervention that I previously mentioned in a number of different directions. But at the end of the day, we had brought a little over $68 million to a region that before we started didn't have enough money to invest in anything new. The $68 million was invested in new models, new curriculum, new facilities, new equipment. When that was going on, we knew if we changed our workforce, we could change the future of our economic development. I can take you to communities in eastern Arkansas now, and some of the mayors are here, where there are automotive manufacturing groups, OEMs, that are in communities that 15 years ago would have never dreamed that they could have had such a plant. I can take you to a 2,000 employee foundation in West Memphis from a company named Hino that is a subsidiary of Toyota, that I think Mayor Fogelman, who is here, Frank, where are you? Right there. Frank and I go way back. I diagnosed Frank very early on with what I call Fogelman's disease. It's where there is an inverse relationship between the size of your ego and your intellect. Frank says that he sees the same thing in me, but at the end of the day, we both share that common trait. Frank will tell you that if we hadn't invested in the way we educate folks, that Hino plant probably wouldn't have ever been in eastern Arkansas. And I guess one of the best examples is that we can take you to Osceola, Arkansas, that 10 years ago, their only connection to a steel mill was that there was one in Blytheville. Now there is a steel mill being constructed in Osceola, Arkansas with a $1 billion, with a B, investment. That is there because there are a number of variables in place today that make it a much more attractive place for them than ever before. It is there because now they understand that there are systems in place to create and sustain the workforce that they have to compete in a global economy. That region across the river is absolutely no different than the one that we're in now. And a part of our model for GMAC, a part of our mission, is that we're working with people on both sides of that river. We're working with people in Mississippi. We're working with people who are several counties removed from Memphis proper. But they all understand very clearly that the future of their community is inextricably linked to the future of the region. And the region's future is inextricably linked to our ability to change the way we think about educating people and change the way we create and sustain the one most important factor today in economic development, which is the skill set capacity of your workforce. Now, I like to think that the entire conversation surrounding regionalism is something that I appreciate, but I can promise you we wouldn't be where we are today with GMAC's organization, and we certainly wouldn't be where we are today in terms of our focus on regionalism if it wasn't for primarily one individual. Mark Luttrell told me before I was ever hired that if you don't find a way to make sure that everybody in this region understands that we all have a collective future that we're responsible for, that we're either going to all hang together or hang separately, then you're not going to be able to be successful in this position. I never have a conversation with Mayor Luttrell that he doesn't want to know what we're doing with communities throughout the region. And I can tell you that that kind of leadership is important for agencies like ours to stay focused. And I think the mayor's here somewhere, but there he is. I don't think you fully appreciate his commitment to this region and his vision for what we can do as a collective effort. And I would encourage you to visit with him at some point and let him convince you that he understands what we need to do to move this region forward. I really appreciate Dr. Johnson's presentation. It made a lot of the points that I probably would have made had I been smart enough. I think I could have listened to him all day And there for a minute I thought I was going to get a chance to. But it was a great presentation. Clearly, if you have a takeaway from his information, it is that our world has changed. This is not the same world that we grew up in. We being the guy that's not exactly 60 yet, but getting close. It's certainly not the world that a lot of the people who are in charge of our educational models or our business models recognize. The regions that admit that the world has changed and change how they look at education and managing people are the regions that are going to be successful in the future. In the past, economic development was about who had the best infrastructure, who had the best incentives, who had the best geography. Today, economic development conversations are still certainly concerned about those things, but the primary issue is where am I going to get my workforce? If I'm in a global economy, every advantage I can find is important to my profitability. So if I can find a location that has the infrastructure, that has the geography, that has the system for distribution, that would be the right word, right? Then I'm going to like that place. But most importantly, what I'm going to do is look for a place that can get me the fuel for my engine, which is that skilled workforce. Sudafed is a wonderful thing, unless you want to talk to folks. So, do we like where we are? Are there things about our economy, things about our communities that we wish we could change? Certainly there's a significant quality of life here. And we are located in exactly the best spot you could be in this country geographically if we want to attract people to build things, because this is the best spot on the planet to take what we build and get it to our customers. Right? Amen? That's that evangelist part. So we couldn't be in a better spot. Got the second most heavily trafficked interstate intersection in the country, 7 regional railroads. You got the Mississippi River, FedEx, UPS. You got communities with qualities of life that are off the charts. You've got professional baseball, basketball, the Orpheum Theater. You've got shopping, great food, great music. What more could you want? When we can add the fact that we can produce and sustain the kind of workforce that our employers need to be profitable, then we have the makings of a perfect storm. The South, as Dr. Johnson told us, is seeing a significant insurgence of people moving to the region. Why? Quality of life. It's warmer here. There are lots of issues that attract folks who reach the point in their life where they are more mobile and certainly more interested in how cold it's going to be when I get up in the morning, or how long it takes me to get to the coffee shop, or is there a place that I know I can go get an affordable gallon of milk, or what's the price of gas going to be? But people are already moving here. So if we have more and more people recognizing the beauty of living in the South, more and more people understanding the quality of life that exists here and all the amenities that goes along with actually living in our region, and we have all the geography and all the infrastructure, then quite frankly, we have a chance to redefine our future. We have a chance to think about who we want to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now and begin to create educational models that are the foundation for economic development. Now, all that sounds very simple. All of it sounds very common sense. But unfortunately, we in education have lost our way over the last 40 years. If you think about the demographics that Dr. Johnson was so aptly describing, and then think about the demographic that drove the design of the educational model that you have in this country today. Those are two very different concepts. Our educational model, basically, in this country hasn't changed in 200 years. The world that he's describing that we're living in is certainly very different from the world that the model was designed to serve. Across the country, there are literally millions of young people between the ages of 18 and 24, millions, who have no marketable skill set. They came through our public education system and have nothing that anybody wants to pay them for. They may not have the resources, may not have the drive, may not have the initiative to go on to post-secondary education, but the truth is, if they don't go on to post-secondary education, they have absolutely no future. The highlight of their day is laying on the couch watching Jerry Springer. And those are the folks who are going to eventually parent. Those are the folks who are going to eventually be, hopefully, constructive members of your communities. They came through an educational model that did not get them what they needed to have a skill set that was marketable. Our country's democracy was built on one central principle: capitalism. Today, capitalism is inextricably linked to our ability to create and sustain a workforce, which has to be the driving force for how we design our educational models. There is absolutely nothing wrong with taking tax dollars, investing in training programs that give our people a chance to get a great job, a great career, that also in the process helps our companies be profitable, pay more taxes, create more jobs, build more buildings, and grow and strengthen the fiber of our communities. I challenge you in the state of Tennessee. I challenge you in the state of Arkansas. Can't say it about Mississippi because they're a little different. If you go check out the standards that we measure the efficacy of your public education systems on, you'll find volumes that are this thick with every imaginable metric and measure, every imaginable assessment. I challenge you to find me anything in that volume that says that the most important litmus test for our educational model should be, does it lead to a great job? We are preparing people to get prepared, to go prepared, to prepare to do something else in the future. And unfortunately, in the process, leaving more and more people behind every year. And those are the people that your economy will have to find some way to either retool or support. We talk about poverty, we talk about crime. Poverty and crime are absolutely directly linked to the qualities of our educational models. Until we recognize that the best investment we can make in dealing with poverty and crime is to make a more significant and proactive and thoughtful investment in education, we're just going to be going in circles, folks. So again, our region has to recognize that we are in the midst of this perfect storm. We have this unbelievable opportunity, unprecedented in my lifetime, to clearly redefine who we are and what we want to be in the very near future. That is heightened in terms of its opportunity by this one definition. Can we retool our educational models to produce the skills that let us attract and keep great employers? Can we find a way for our young people to go through an educational model that does not require them to have the resources to go beyond high school to have a chance to be an effective and participatory member of our economy? How do we justify the fact that we have high school models, K through 12 programs, and students come out of there totally dependent on what happens to them next in terms of their future? It's insane. If you were starting it over, it would look nothing like it looks today. But we all shuffle around in our communities and pretend that someone is in charge. Pretend that someone is thinking this through. And nothing could be further from the truth. I listened to a superintendent in Collierville just a few days ago and we're working on some initiatives with them. One of his board members was in the conversation, and he said, you know, if there's 100% jar here of the ability to change our educational model, our local school board has the ability to impact about 10% of that. The other 90% is dictated either by federal or state mandates. And you'll say, well, somebody's got to be in charge. Somebody's got to think this through. But I assure you, having been an educator all of my life, my father just retired with 60 years of education background in the state of Arkansas. My wife's a teacher. Some of the dumbest folks I know are educators. They get confused on occasion. You wonder how we ended up with some of the highest teenage obesity rates on the globe? We stopped teaching physical education. We don't teach people what to eat. We don't teach them the value of exercise. Why did we stop teaching PE? In Arkansas, one of their prime motivators was we want our folks to do better on the math test, so we're going to strip the time from PE and put it in math class. There's nothing wrong with focusing on math class, but if the folks are too obese to get off the couch or too unhealthy to be able to live a normal lifespan, to me, I need to take care of those things before I worry about whether or not they can do algebra. I've told this story. The mayor's going to cringe when I start telling it again, but it really came home to me. I am an educator. My wife's an educator. We're supposed to know what's going on. My youngest son was fortunate enough to get drafted out of high school to go play professional baseball. Most, if not all, of his athleticism coming from his father. He had an occasion to go play in an Under Armour All-American game in Wrigley Field. When you finish, they take you downstairs into the catacombs, and they want you to sign, I think the number is something like 2,000 baseball cards. And I thought, well, surely they're going to sign those cards and give them to him. Well, they got a little different business model than that. They sign them and keep them and put them up and hope that the kid makes it one day so they can sell them and make some money. But they went down in small groups, and I'm hungry. I'm ready to go. And we're there. Just rolls on. The kids are coming out. I can't find my kid. So I go down into the catacombs and stick my head around the corner, and he's still over there just painfully trying to sign a baseball card. And they had made him stop because he was printing his name. Said, no, you can't do that. You got to sign it. My kid couldn't sign his name because some educator somewhere decided that we didn't need to teach kids cursive writing anymore. I'd like to know who that guy is. Been hard for us to ever verify the Declaration of Independence if folks couldn't sign their name. That same kid we had tested later for dyslexia. Discovered he did not have dyslexia, but reaffirmed that he could not spell. So I did what every normal father would do. I started yelling at my wife. What have you done? How can this happen? You know, this kid's living in a home with two parents that supposedly pay attention to this sort of stuff. He was a part of about 5 years worth of educational experimentation in the state of Arkansas, and it happened in Tennessee too, where we decided that we didn't need to teach kids phonics anymore. We started teaching them sight words. And there's a whole period of particularly males who obviously weren't smart enough to compensate for the silliness of the program. Most of the females did find a way to compensate for it. But he's a part of about a 5-year period in this country where we had an educational model that said, we got a better way. We're not going to teach phonics, we're going to teach them sight words. He can't spell cat. Now, he is being tutored today as we speak in Sarasota, Florida, because I can afford to get that done. What about all the other parents of children in this country who can't afford to do that? And we just let that happen. If we're crazy enough to stop teaching people to write cursively, to sign their name, if we're crazy enough to not teach people phonics so they can spell and write, if we're crazy enough to stop teaching physical education and then wonder why the entire generation is so acutely obese, we're crazy enough to do anything. We have to question everything about what's going on in our educational models because it is the most important piece of who we are as a country and moving this country forward. Right now, the fact that we're failing more students in our systems than we are contributing to their success is a clear indicator that our system is broke. Our system is broken. That broke is an Arkansas term. But most of you knew what I was talking about. The communities, the regions that recognize that we are dealing with different populations, different values, different circumstances, but who stay focused on the core values of this country, the core values of our democracy, the core values of economic development, but realize that we have to deliver that educational component differently. Those are the places that 10 years from now are going to be the communities that people all across the country are talking about. And there's absolutely no reason that can't be the Mid-South, that cannot be the region surrounding Memphis. We have everything working in our favor. We just have to stop long enough to retool our educational model and then watch it produce the results that we will design it to produce. Now, let me see if I'm smart enough to do this. Okay. Reed mentioned the Greater Memphis Alliance for a Competitive Workforce. We're trying to raise money right now for a grant fund to find somebody that can come up with a better name. So if you have any suggestions, we're certainly open to them. But this model in the Mid-South that is working in communities throughout the region, we got the Bartlett mayor sitting on the front row. He's going to tell you he's seen us in Bartlett a lot. We've been in Collierville, Millington, Arlington. We've been in Fraser. We've certainly been all over Shelby County. We've worked with people in Mississippi. We've worked with people in Arkansas because it is a regional approach. And if we haven't been in your community and spoken with your public school folks, well, we would gladly come. Usually they don't invite us back, but we would go once. But at the end of the day, it is a regional model to ask the questions and then to figure out how we change the model so that we can produce the one most important ingredient to growing our region, which is this skilled workforce. Now, I'm going to step out here so I can read this because I've got it on a sheet of paper and I can't see it. All right. We were established in 2014, as Reed told you, by some very visionary folks who recognized that if we can apply this regional model to changing our educational strategies, we can change our economic development. Two simple statements in terms of our mission. Number one, make certain that our educational models are producing the skills that our employers need. That sounds like a very common sense approach. I can tell you that today, nothing is further from the truth. That doesn't mean our educators aren't great folks and certainly motivated and certainly committed. It means that they're forced to do a lot of stuff that just absolutely makes no sense that's either coming from the federal government or their state legislature. Educators who want to fix this, who know how to fix it, can't. So there's got to be policy changes, there's got to be conversations at much different levels in this country to be able to do what we need to do to take care of our future economy. But the main thing, the litmus test for the efficacy of any educational model, is it going to lead to a great job that is a part of a great career path? If it doesn't do that, then why in the world are we spending our time on it? And secondly, we got to make certain that the people who live in this region understand the opportunities that exist here today in terms of employment. This skills gap has elevated wage rates, it's changed working conditions, it's changed everything about the kinds of jobs that are available to us. And the beauty is that with relatively short periods of time and the right educational component, we can take people who are impoverished, who are coming from some of the most desolate environments on the planet, and put them in a position to be able to not only provide for themselves but their family and have a great career for the rest of their working life. We had an experiment in West Memphis several years ago. We got a little money. I think we got maybe some of it from the DRA. That was before Chris was there. The guy before him was a lot easier to deal with than Chris. We said, we want to try this model. We worked with a local medical device company here. We revamped their curriculum. I remember distinctly walking into the classroom with our instructors, and they'd said, oh, we're ready to go, Doc. We've got a brand new curriculum. I said, how long does it take? They said, oh, it's just 32 weeks. And the employer just hung his head. I said, you guys are smoking dope. Go back and cut it in half. When we got finished, it was 13 weeks. We took the 13-week program, went into the projects in West Memphis, Arkansas, brought people who had been born, raised, had never left the projects, who didn't know the definition of CNC when we started. In 13 weeks, we started those people out with companies in this region, at that time at $15 an hour. In 13 weeks, we transformed somebody's life, a family, a neighborhood. And we know how to do that. The problem is our public schools don't get paid to do that sort of thing. They don't have the money for the facilities. They don't have the money for the equipment. They don't have the money to hire the right instructors. Think about the insanity of a model that says we can go raise tons of money to hire a football coach or the right basketball coach, and we think that's great. And I went to college on a basketball scholarship. I tell people all the time, it was because I could shoot fast. I didn't make many, but I shot a lot. But the point is, we don't see any problem with doing that for athletics. When was the last time somebody thought about doing it to hire a math teacher or an English teacher or a machinist to come into our public schools and work when they can go make $100,000 a year as a machinist, and we want them to come back and make the same money that we hire a person out of college with a sociology degree? That's insane. So the whole model, as my kids would say, is jacked up. We got to figure out how to unjack it. At the end of the day, it's not going to happen if you don't fix it. Those people running your educational institutions are trapped in bureaucracies that doesn't even give them a chance to breathe. I was in a hearing Monday night with some folks, a school board talking about terminating a coach's contract. And that coach had an incident with a student that was over the age of 18, who had a long criminal record, who was disruptive at every turn. And I remember there was a lawyer from Little Rock there who was reading this code of ethics for teachers about how we're supposed to conduct ourselves with our students, which all sounds great. When I got up for my testimony, the guy said, do you agree with this coach's actions? You know, he violated this code of ethics. I said, Hoss, the first thing you need to do is with that code of ethics is bring it down here and get these kids to read it. Because they don't understand that's the way that we're supposed to operate. What was the issue, at the core of that issue is that coach and that student were both in systems that weren't designed to work for either one of them. That student could have been much more successful in a different setting, so could the coach. But we, just like the comment that Dr. Johnson made, this is a one-size-fits-all model. And the trouble is, our one size has grown in differentiation and variety since the 200-year ago time that we created the model. So all we want to do is figure out what folks need to make money and how we get our folks great jobs. And when we do that, I challenge any of the mayors that are in the room to tell me a significant difficulty in your community that putting more people to work in great jobs and paying more taxes won't help. And that's all we're trying to do is create educational models that are focused on that, not focused on telling them, okay, if you want to get a skill set now, you've got to go out here and spend 2 more years, or 2 years after that, or 4 years after that, and you may go get a baccalaureate degree, come out with a $100,000 debt and still can't find a job. Now, how many of you 10 years ago, 20 years ago could have imagined that condition? That's who we are. That's our world. We got to change how we educate folks if we want to get out of that trap. 5 core functions. I'll go through this very quickly because I got to get the real expert up here. First, figure out what are the short-term needs of your employers. And what that actually means is what is messed up now that we need to fix, but we don't have the tools to fix it as well as we would like. The way to fix it the way we want it is to create a different system. But how do we deal with the problems associated with the fact that the system we've been using didn't work? 350 companies in the last 7-8 months that we've communicated with. We've been in plants, we've been in HR offices. I don't know if John Churchill's here. John Churchill is a fantastic resource for our region, understands the HR side of what's going on and certainly understands the production side. He leads that division for us and has done great work with minimal skills and resources. Now you understand GMAC is a group of folks, very small group, whose charge is to go make cool things happen, but the only tools you get are the tools that folks have been using to jack the thing up to begin with. We don't have great resources. So if we're going to change anything, we've got to go get the providers, the educational providers, or the companies to change their behavior. And so the work is really about modifying the participants as much as it is about changing the system. But we hope to work this division out of a job. We're doing safety training, we're doing soft skill training, we're doing training in everything from forklift driving to CDL training, things that are very short in nature but meeting companies' immediate needs. The second one is a very important one. It really ought to be first, and that is we have to do a survey to make certain that we know exactly what our companies need. We think we know, but until you go ask them, you don't know. We're also surveying people on the street to ask them, what are the main reasons you don't have a job? What are the obstacles that you're trying to overcome that we need to help you with? I was a part of an experiment in Arkansas several years ago that happened in a sort of a weird way, but it's kind of how politics and bureaucracies work. There was a bureaucracy in Little Rock that had a statewide mission. They had a pool of money that they couldn't spend appropriately. They were spending it and they weren't getting the right results, so they just called time out and said, well, we're going to screw this up. We're going to get blamed for it, so let's go find somebody else dumb enough to take the money, and then we can blame them. The community colleges were dumb enough to take the money. The model was based on how do you create systems that take folks who the system has already failed and retool them and get them back into the workforce. So we were dealing with folks that had the typical most chronic problems. They didn't have transportation, they didn't have child care, they didn't have food, they didn't have clothes, they didn't have money to buy books. And yes, it is great that the state of Tennessee has a tremendous scholarship program that Governor Haslam and his folks should be congratulated on. But let me tell you folks, I lived for 23 years over there watching folks who had scholarships come into that building who didn't have money to eat, who didn't have clothes, who couldn't afford books, who would come in every day and stand out front of the food court wishing that somebody would give them $1 to get a bag of chips while the rest of us were in there eating. So we figured out a way to steal a little money from another pot. I hope they don't ever figure it out. And we put a big pot of soup, and I always had soup and cornbread. And we had a little jar there that said, put in what you can. If you can't put anything, don't worry about it. Eat. You can't learn if you're hungry. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most profound. Over a 7-year period in Arkansas, we proved that you could have a better success rate, a better retention rate with the most challenged population simply by changing how you deliver aid to them. Yes, we gave them gas vouchers. Yes, we gave them child care vouchers. Yes, we gave them tutoring background and expenses. Yes, we did all sorts of weird things that any self-respecting Republican would say, I can't believe we're doing that. But I promise you, we didn't spend any more money on those people, anywhere close to the amount of money that's required to incarcerate them or support them on welfare. And what we did was we proved that when you change the way you think about providing services, you can take the most statistically predisposed population to failure and actually get a success and retention rate higher than the one that my kids enjoy. But we ain't got time to change the model. Why? Because your kids are making it through it. Because you're figuring out how to compensate for the fact that it doesn't work. But other parents, other kids don't have that luxury. And the fact that we are enjoying today the circumstances of rising poverty, rising crime, rising desperation is because more and more people are being failed by the model. And the reason we haven't changed it is it just hasn't bothered us enough yet. I didn't hear any amens on that. But that's the truth, folks. I promise you, if some United States congressman or a United States senator or some state legislator's child had the challenges that we impose on poor children to move through this system, we'd already be fixing it. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make certain that it gets fixed because it is a no-win proposition. Are we better off in our region today with poverty than we were 20 years ago? No. Are we better off with crime than we were 20 years ago? No. So something isn't working. When that poverty and crime actually touches home on the right folks, then we figure out how to fix it. The communities that get ahead of it and fix it because it's the right thing to do for their economy and their quality of life, those are the communities that are going to win in the future. So we're going to go ask employers what they want, and then we're going to go design models to produce that. The educational alignment of those models is the most important component of this whole concept. Pauline Vernon is here somewhere. We're very fortunate to have her driving this part of what we do. We were very fortunate to receive a $9.8 million grant from the Department of Labor early on that has invested significant resources in every institution in the region in new technical training capacity, new equipment, new infrastructure, new faculty and staff. Why? So that we can design models to produce the skill sets we need, and so we can put those people in section 1 up there out of work. If we're doing the right thing with our educational models, our employers are going to enjoy a very different talent level when that model starts percolating. Number 4, we have jobs that are open in our region that nobody knows anything about, jobs that people have never heard of, wage rates that are unprecedented. We have shorter skill set requirements for those jobs than ever before, yet we have few people who get that information. We have about a half a dozen programs in our region today in welding, in diesel technology, in IT, in machining, that are directly related to unprecedented career opportunities. You know, every one of those programs is under-enrolled because folks don't get it. When you go to high school graduation, what's the consistent theme? We'll all stand up and talk about, our graduating class had $3.8 million worth of scholarships this year. They don't tell you that that was confined to about 8% of the class. They also don't tell you that the only future those folks have is to go spend that money at another place so that they can get the education that they really need to go to work. Our model is pretty simple. We want to take the first 2 years of college, the last 2 years of high school, and compress them into where they are absolutely indiscernible one from the other. So students can come out of high school, as they are across the river, with 20, 30, 40 hours of college credit. Some of the poorest kids on the planet already knowing when they come out of high school that they can get a degree, they can learn, they can go to college because they've been in college for 2 years. Having half of an associate degree paid for before they ever get out. Instead of taking college algebra in high school and college algebra when I get to college, why don't I take them at the same time? English, science, it's insane. Why is it insane? Because the bureaucracies are designed to sustain their existence, and at the end of the day, their existence is based on what? Money. I know that's going to come as a shock to you. You don't even want to get me started talking about developmental education. One of the greatest lies ever perpetuated by higher education population in the world. We know how to fix developmental education. The reason we don't fix it is because folks make too much money off of it. We know how to fix a lot of things, we just haven't been motivated to get it done. Now, our model is different in that in the past, if you took a technical track, We taught you how to fix a black and white TV, and then when there was no more black and white TVs, you had no future. And you certainly had no educational portability of that. In our model, you can take a welding class in the 10th grade and still finish a professional engineering certification, and I can take you across the bridge and show you young men and women who have done just that. When they come out of high school, we ought to provide them a skill set that is marketable, that says they can go to work if they want to. It doesn't mean that they have to. It just means that they can if they want to. Most people who go through a baccalaureate degree attainment model today do what? They work while they're doing it. We've taken a 4-year model and turned it into a 6-year model or an 8-year model. The reason poor people don't finish those models is because they run out of money. You and I have a vested interest in getting every person on this planet as much education as we can, so what? So they can take care of themselves. I want to get them an education so they can go to work and get a great job and pay taxes and raise kids and have the kinds of home environments that I was fortunate enough to have. But you can't do that in today's world without the skill set. In 1978, when I graduated high school from Charleston, Arkansas, the next day, 2/3 of my graduating class was in a pickup truck. That was back when you only had one seat. They were driving the 30 miles from Charleston to Fort Smith to go to work at Baldor, Ream, Riverside Furniture, because those jobs were available to high school students. And those people are all retiring now. They've had great careers. Go show me where those jobs are today for that high school student that simply graduates one day and has got to go start taking care of themselves the next. They're not there. So what do we expect them to do? We expect them to go find a bunch of money, go spend 2, 4, 6 more years in an educational model, and then still might not get what they need to go to work. That's why we're getting the results that we're getting. And the last one is we got to raise a whole lot of money, which some days is fun and some days isn't. But at the end of the day, you can't fix this model without finding resources. The one thing that you need to understand about education is that the greatest catalyst for seeing them change is to simply get a different pot of money and tell them they got to do something different to get the money, and they will flock there. Because they're all trying to figure out how to feed this monster that's based on a model that isn't working anymore, so they're having to compensate for it, which means resources are very important to them at the moment. Now, we've got some great people on our board. We're chaired by Willie Gregory with Nike, and the thing I want you to see about this board is that it's primarily made up of business people. This is a very, very serious group of folks about moving our region forward in terms of our workforce. Debbie McKitton is a plant manager at Chemours. You've got Blair Taylor, who is with Memphis Tomorrow, who's done an unbelievable job in helping get this organization seated. Gene Baker with Smith Nephew. Reed, who you've already met. J.W. Gibson, a local entrepreneur. Barbara Prescott, Mayor Luttrell. Phil Trineri with the Memphis Chamber, Kerry Vaughn, and then our new Jim Strickland, who obviously, again, as Mayor Luttrell said, is drinking from a fire hose, but he knows enough about GMAC to know that who we are and what we're doing, and he's been very supportive, and we appreciate that. So that's the caliber of people that are engaged in this conversation. There's nothing keeping you from being engaged in it. We have a lot of information on the web, a lot of information that we want to share with you, and I've already screwed up because I want to make one more point for number 4. We just received a $1.5 million grant from a local philanthropic group to build a career navigator system. It will be the first of its kind in the country. It's going to be based on this technology. 8 years ago, you saw President Barack Obama get elected to the White House using this technology. Forever changed political science conversations in this country. We have the ability now to identify the skill sets required for jobs, show people where the jobs are, show them their own assessment that we help them create, help them build resumes in video format or in text. We're going to be able to let them know exactly the skill requirement of the job, where that is different from theirs, and then provide them most of the information they need right here. And instead of waiting for them to come to us, we're going to shove it in their cell phones 4 and 5 times a day. This model is being recognized as the only one of its kind in the country, and your real speaker in a minute is going to tell you that this is a game changer. We're fortunate to got the money. We're certainly fortunate to have a company move from Canada here to help us build this tool. Mary Hayes was here earlier. There she is. It's a world-class company, been doing training for people like McDonald's and GE and companies of that caliber all over the world, training people how to use computers in places that don't even have internet. Certainly very fortunate to have them here. When you want to think about the power of this, how many of you have grandchildren? Okay, I got a 4-year-old grandson. He's wired for 110 but running on 220. I've never seen a human in my life that could destroy more stuff faster than that kid can. And apparently he's hard of hearing because his parents try to get him to stop all the time and he don't pay a bit of attention. I found a hearing aid for him not too long ago. I found a hardware store that had one of those old wire-handled fly swats. It's amazing to me how much better his hearing gets when you're holding that in your hand. But at the end of the day, that kid can take this machine and become almost hypnotized. He can go sit in a chair and be in a circumstance where he is no bother to anybody because he's totally engaged with the machine and the machine is teaching him things. Our model is going to use that technology to help people get skill sets in a very innovative way, much more rapidly, much more efficiently and effectively. And we can't wait to show it to you. As soon as we get it finished, you can see it.